Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you, God, for this opportunity to share with the folks around the world. And today, God, I pray that clarity will come. I pray that encouragement will come. I pray that lives will be changed. I also pray that people will be transformed by the things that were spoken by the men that are on this Zoom tonight. I ask God that you to encourage us and give us what to say and how to say it as we work together collectively as brothers to do what you called us to do today. God, lead us, guide us, word our mouths, allow people to be changed and transformed by this unity that they see of brothers tonight. And I just appreciate you, God, for laying this on Pastor Art. And we pray, God, for continued continuity and creativity and strength. And we just give you praise and honor for all that you continue to do in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, I hope it's live right now. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll check the page in a minute or have my wife check the page, gentlemen. So hopefully it's live. If it is, please share it to your audience because, like I said, this is something that they need to hear. So just a quick recap. We got some amazing men here on the line for those that are watching. We got Mike Pollanday, retired Marine. We got myself, Pastor Pollard, current Marine and pastor at Calvary International Church of God in Christ. We got Clifton, former police officer, or I'm sorry, current police officer. We got Antonio, minister, army, everything. We got Timothy, who is a retired Navy chief. We got Randy, current Marine and assistant pastor of the Lord City Church. We have Eric, who's a police officer, and we have Pastor Tuck, the pastor of Living Faith Tabernacle. And what we're trying to do here, man, is just have a conversation amongst men. I know there are men out there who've been feeling the stress that comes along with what's going on in the world, our current climate. And some of you may not have had the opportunity to express how you feel openly. Some of you may be still trying to figure out and comprehend what you're feeling inside. And that's what this forum is for, is not to decide whether a certain way of expressing is right or wrong, but basically to just discuss how we're dealing with it and hopefully to help some people out. I know there's some mothers and some wives out there who are trying to interpret what their sons and their husbands are feeling and how they're going through this. And hopefully by listening to what some of these men on the line are saying, people will be helped. People will be able to kind of interpret what their family members, what their friends, what their colleagues are feeling, and to help them to talk through some of those things. So that's what we're doing here today. I was really inspired by a scripture that I just happened to come across from the book of Matthew. And it said, "For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." And basically, not to get too technical when it comes to the scripture, basically it was just telling me the power of words and how important it is to speak out, and not only to speak out, but to speak out positively. And so that's what we're here to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off by saying this. So we all know what's going on in the world today, right? We've seen we've all did our 2.24 mile run for Ahmaud Arbery. And then right after that, we saw the video of Amy Cooper kind of weaponizing a person's race. And then directly following that, we saw George Floyd, who got brutally murdered, and it was all captured on screen. And then we saw the community all over the world respond in a way that we had never seen before. And the reality is that response was not something that was uncommon. It was a reflection of something that we all felt and we all had to deal with it. So with you brothers on the line, I just want to just get some of your thoughts about how did you feel when you saw the news of what happened with George Floyd.
Well, I think for me, it was. I think for me, one of the it was anger, but it was like it was almost like to the point where you're talking about the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it was and I think sometimes that's the piece of it that gets lost in the discussion is we're hearing the chants of Mr. Floyd, but I think it's so much larger than that. It is the culmination of all the individuals, all the Breonna Taylors and the Trayvon Martins. It is like at some point it was like enough is enough, and that was the to see this man, what he went through. It was at that point it was like I just can't I can't take another one. I can't sit back and watch and see another individual. And you knew the narrative. You knew the stuff that was going to be said. His background was going to come into question. You knew the I feared for my life. You heard all of the same rhetoric that continues to come out over and over again. And it was like before it even gets a chance to get there, it's like I'm angry, and that was the initial reaction to me was just I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing this in the streets by what I look at as individuals who are there to serve and protect us citizens. Being military, I understand that that there's an inherent danger that comes along with serving and protecting and what that all comes with. But I also know that through my military training that we were taught that when we went into combat, that there were things that we had to be cautious of, and we just didn't go firing willy nilly, and we didn't just go, you know, rapidly just our weapons are the first thing, and we couldn't do that in a war zone. It's just tiring to see that being done on the streets of the United States of America, the home of the free, and all of the rhetoric that you learn through years and years of schooling. Home of the free, all the we the people, all the beautiful narratives that we hear over and over again, and to continually see innocent lives being killed in the street, it was overwhelming for me, and that was kind of my take on the initial hearing of what happened.
Yeah, man. You mentioned something. You mentioned the whole military narrative and being a combat veteran myself, being deployed to Iraq in the early stages of the invasion. I remember from General Mattis at the time, getting those speeches and hearing how he expected us to conduct ourselves as we crossed the line of departure and getting those cards with rules of engagement that we had to carry on us at all times, and having strict rules when it came to when we were to engage and when we were not to engage. And I also served in the embassy along with Mike Pollanday, where we were exposed to federal law enforcement, and it was the same. There was a continuum of force that had to be adhered to. There were certain rules of when we were to apply certain types of force, and so I can definitely understand that. But we have some law enforcement on the line too. So, Eric, how did you feel when you kind of saw that happen?
What was the question again? I had to step away just a second. What was the original question?
So the original question was, how did we feel basically when we heard the news about Eric Garner? When we saw the video, what was your reaction? And Tony kind of gave his spill, and he compared it to a combat experience, being in the army or being in the military in general, and how we're held to strict standards when it comes to when we engage and what type of force we use. And basically there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to law enforcement with that. But I just wanted to know if what was you guys' thought when you initially saw that video?
Uh, my initial feeling is really just tired of seeing black men and young men dying in the streets from whether it's police officers or it's the guys that just run them down in the street for no reason, just because of the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see in the media. That's what our sons and our daughters go up against when they go out in the street. And it's just, I'm tired of seeing that type of thing go on out there, whether it's police officers or just people in general. We're up against a lot.
Yep.
And it's just, my initial feeling was, I'm tired of seeing that.
Okay. Yeah, death seems to be the narrative a lot, and you know it's funny, man, because like our kids get exposed to death, and I mean black kids get exposed to death at such an early age now, and it's not, these things aren't just natural deaths. They're you know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, you experience death because it was an old person, you know, that died, and you're going to the funeral. But now, you know, you can open up an app and see death everywhere. And typically, for the most part, the ones that are getting advertised and are getting a lot of media coverage are the people that look like a lot of us that are on this line today. So yeah, I definitely agree with that, for real, man. So here's a question that should kind of get everyone to talking, right? So we all know how we felt when we saw that, right? So for me, it wasn't so much George Floyd, and let me explain that, right? So George Floyd, when I saw that video, I was highly disturbed. But this is how the sequence of events went down for me, right? I saw, you know, like I told you guys before we started, we marched for Ahmaud Arbery. You know what? 2 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior. Then I was laying in the bed because it was nighttime here in Okinawa, Japan, where you guys were. You probably saw it in the morning time or in the afternoon. And my wife turns over to me and she shows me the video of Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper. And for those people that are watching that aren't familiar with that, basically there was a white woman who attempted to weaponize a man's race against him. And then I didn't realize it affected me at that moment. Maybe, you know, I fell asleep, and maybe 30 minutes after that, she shows me the video of George Floyd. And to me, I really didn't think much about it at that time because I was like, you know, all right, there's another one. You know, I was bothered, I was outraged, but it was like, it's another one. And that should say something in itself, to the point where I was kind of numb, right? Numb to seeing this. And it kind of points to what you were talking about, Eric. Like, we see it so much that we sometimes become numb, right? But I woke up the next morning to get ready for work, and I was disturbed, like highly disturbed. And just to be transparent and open with you gentlemen and whoever's watching, I was getting ready for work, and in the military, we shave in the morning, right? We have to shave. So I'm looking in the mirror, I'm shaving. And out of nowhere, I just started bawling. Tears were coming out of my eyes, and uncontrollably. And I had I had no clue why. And all day it was on my mind. And I realized it wasn't so much George Floyd's death that bothered me. That scene was gruesome. But what bothered me was the fact that I saw Amy Cooper a few minutes before doing what she did. And when I was looking in the mirror, the reason why I was crying is because I'm a pastor. I'm a successful, high-ranking enlisted military man with commendatory records. I'm in a fraternity that does great things for the community. I do all these things, and at the end of the day, I'm still a black man. And I can't walk around with all those achievements on my chest to say, hey, don't kill me. I have all of this. And so that's what was going through my mind, right? And so that's what kind of bothered me, and that's what still kind of bothers me, is the fact that could be weaponized against me. Something that I have no control over can be weaponized against me. And I think a lot of people are dealing with that, but they're not able to interpret that with all that's going on in the world. And so speaking of interpretation and how to deal with it, how do you guys think the response has been, like, to the people, like in the military, in the church, in the police force? How do you think the response has been to these issues?
be totally honest with you, guys. First of all, let me start out by saying this. When I saw what happened to George Floyd and what happened to Breonna Taylor and in the Cooper situation, as a matter of fact, when I first saw the Floyd thing, I was actually sitting inside my patrol vehicle. And I remember asking myself, wait a minute, is this 2020 or is this 1958?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, what reality are we living in? When a brother can be thrown on the ground and to have another guy on his neck for nearly 9 minutes with his hands in his pocket, and people think that's okay. Yeah. And even for me as a veteran police officer, it's like, wait a minute, this is not real. I'm like, God, please tell me that this is not what's happening right now. And like Eric said, I'm so tired of seeing it. I'm so tired of seeing it because the problem is twofold for me. And I'm sure it's probably the same thing with Eric, and it's probably the same thing with you guys as well. I work in a position where I have a voice. As a law enforcement officer, I deal with people every single day. I deal with white people and black people and Asian people and Latino people. I deal with all kinds of people of browns. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, look, I have got to put my biases in check. I got to go ahead and serve these people. I'm not a warrior. I'm a servant. And I think that's a whole other conversation that I'm sure we'll have later in terms of the identification of being a warrior as opposed to a servant. And so I'm asking myself, like, wait a minute, this just cannot be real. And so the black side of me is like, wait a minute, that could have very well been my son. My 20-year-old son could have been mistaken for somebody. It could have been me, uniform or not. I'm driving down the street in my regular car. I get stopped by the police. I could say everything right and still be pulled out of the car. I know this to be true. And so again, for me, it's I'm just, like I was telling you guys before, I'm really torn down the middle between both my police side, my black side. But overall, because you asked about the response, I think the response has been better in some areas than others. I think in some areas, I think the response has been lackluster, I guess. And personally, I think I would like to see more solidarity between police agencies and the community. Now here in Nenton, I think we've had a pretty good response. The protests have been really peaceful, and first of all, I have to commend my chief because they actually got out and they, talked to the crowd. And I saw the mayor out there, and I saw the sheriff, and I think they did a really good job. But that for me is just superficial because I believe that there's a deeper issue that needs to be talked about. And what I mean by that is that even though we have a good law enforcement agency here in Coweta County and Nenton, there is a large segment of the population here who don't trust the police. A lot of people do trust the police. I'd like to see more solidarity between the police and the church community because ultimately, whether I'm comfortable with a conversation or not or whatever, something needs to be done. And, again, I think that overall across the country, I know the riots and the looters have been bad. They're destroying property and things like that. And I know that's ultimately counterproductive for me. But I can also empathize with the people that feel like they have no other recourse but to go out and burn down buildings and shoot people and rob and all these kind of things. Yes, it's wrong. I don't think we should be doing it. But again, if you understand anger, this is just my opinion. If you understand anger, if you say that you're tired, well, at what point do you get tired of being tired? And when people go ahead and do things like that, we can sit back as leaders of the community and say, look, you shouldn't do that. But again, I think empathy goes a long way. And until we sit down and talk to these people on an individual basis or collectively, we're never going to bridge the divide. So I think the response has been good overall, but I'd like to see more.
Okay.
Cliff, I want to ask you a question if you don't mind, man. I definitely don't want to, you being the sole police officer on the thing, I definitely want to, because I applaud you for what you do, and I know you, so I know your heart. I think if we had more individuals who had the heart that you have, we would have the problems and the things that we have going on. But one of the main questions that I would want to ask you as a police officer is, when we talk about the good cop versus the bad cop, and we have that narrative that goes back and forth, what I don't understand is the culture that will allow good cops not to say anything when bad cops do what they do. And so obviously there's a culture that has created that thin blue line, if you will, that has created the culture to where, when we just use, for example, what happened with Mr. Floyd, even when you look at what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, the line that's drawn says, I don't rat on my fellow officers. I don't say anything about it. When I can stand with my hands in my pocket as this individual is doing what he's doing. Because the funny thing is you see the various cultures, and we talked about it. I agree with you when you say that there's some who are doing it right and some who are doing it wrong. For instance, we can watch and we see I see it here in Kansas City and other places where the police officers are actually standing in solidarity saying, hey, we. But then you look at some other areas like Buffalo, New York, where the 75-year-old man. Now, here's the crazy part about it. We're talking about the violence that's happening to Black and brown people, but for the white people and the Hispanic people that are standing up for the Black people, they're also being assaulted by the cops as well. The 75-year-old man in Buffalo that gets pushed down, and that's acting as if that's okay by some. I have to be careful who I put those narratives on because I'm still in the Army. But with that being said, when those things can be dismissed, there's a culture. What is it? The 57 police officers in Buffalo who, because of the two cops that got chastised for what they did, they quit in solidarity instead of standing up and saying what they did was absolutely wrong when they pushed that person down. So the question I have to ask is, what is the culture? Because I know for me in the Army, for sure, we're always told that as NCOs, we should police up our battle buddies when they're doing something not right. If I see my fellow non-commissioned officer not performing in the way that he should, it's part of my duty to police him up and say, hey, high speed, hey, sergeant, hey, battle, I need you to perform better. You're failing at the oath that you gave. So what is it about the culture that doesn't allow that to happen behind that thin blue line? And that's the thing that when we continue to keep saying good cops, I need the good cops to speak out against the bad cops, because we can't fix it out here. It's something that needs to be fixed from within. And I don't know what it is that won't allow that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think part of that comes from, I think part of that is department specific. And what I mean by that is that, I can tell you right now without a shadow of a doubt, something like what happened with Mr. Floyd, or, the situation with was it Breonna Taylor with the no-knock warrant. You have guys go in and accidents happen, this kind of thing. You have a situation where you'll, take for instance a traffic stop. There have been occasions where a younger officer would stop somebody, pull them over to the side of the road, and the next thing you know, words are being exchanged. This person has an attitude, that officer has an attitude, and me standing back trying to act as a backup. I have had the occasion where I had to yank that officer back, like, look, wait a minute, we're about to put ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in. But I think a lot of that comes from the command staff, the culture that they are instilling in the frontline officers. Okay, look, guys, we won't tolerate this. It comes from the training, the daily talks from the supervisors, the lieutenants, the sergeants, those kind of things. Knowing that, hey, look, this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Now, of course, I'm not saying it's always been that way, but I do think it's department specific. Now, the Newnan Police Department is not the Atlanta Police Department. The Atlanta Police Department is not the Cobb County Police Department or New York Police Department. These things that you see happening over and over and over again, I think it's a situation where if you took a deep look, such as, department records and things like that, and people, disciplinary records, such as the case with the officer in Minneapolis. How many use of force complaints did he have? I think it was 13, 14 use of force complaints. Mm-hmm. I can tell you right now it was up there. It was way too many. Let's just say that. That guy would not have been hired at the Newnan Police Department. I can tell you that right now. Because what you find is with people like that, it's a liability on the city, on the county, on the federal agency when you don't deal with it. And so, for me, I think it's department specific. Even though now, I will admit there is a culture that exists within policing. And what I mean by this is like, hey, look, yes, you are my brother. You are my brother. I'm going to take care of you. I want to go home and end my shift alive. I want you to be alive. So I'm going to do what I have to do to protect you, and you're going to do what you have to do for me. But even with that being said, it's like, okay, we're going to do what we have to do, but we're going to do it honestly and transparently and with empathy. And I think the situation is what you find is that when you see these incidents happen in these police departments where the culture is, hey, look, I'm not going to tell on you, even if you do something bad. I think it's a problem of the leadership, or I guess, or lack thereof. That's my personal take on it, because I don't see any department having those specific issues if the leadership is squared away. Now, you may have your isolated incident where you may have a wild card. You may hire. I hear a lot of people talking about, okay, well, they need to do better psychological examinations or polygraph tests and things like that. Those things are great, but those tests don't pick up everything. You know what I'm saying? They don't pick up everything. You never know what a guy's going to be going through. You never know what's going to happen on the side of the road. Mistakes happen. It's not a justification, but things happen. But I think if your leadership is right, I think if your leadership is encouraging the right culture, I think that you can mitigate some of those issues. And personally, in my area where I've worked at, I have not seen a culture where it was okay to, hey, look, take care of your buddy. If he does something wrong, don't come, just kind of pat him on the back and say it's okay, and just hope he doesn't do it again. I have not personally seen that. So it's
So
leadership.
I like the fact that you mentioned leadership, because not only in the police department but in the military and in the community, leadership really is what drives the bus and what enforces change, right? So I'm gonna go to Pastor Tuck. Then I want to hear from you, Randy. But Pastor Tuck has one of the largest churches amongst any of my pastor friends. Um, and so I'm sure in your congregation you have a few police officers. You have some people in your congregation that are angry at what's going on, that stand on all different sides of the playing field. Um, so, Pastor Tuck, sir, how are you leading your church through this?
Wow. Well. First of all, let me just for allowing me to converse in this forum, and it's a great question. Leading in this climate, it's quite interesting because many people have asked, where's the church? What is the church doing? Um, you know, Several people have asked me that question. um, as you know, our church has, always been on the front line of everything that has went on in the community and at large. Uh, but it's truly a challenge now having a conversation with our police officers, and then those guys who come to my church who smell like weed.
Mm-hmm.
That conversation, of that they're coming to get Jesus, but and so the conversation for us has been, again, educating, and trying to build a bridge between the two, which, as you know, isn't always easy because of all of the things that have happened in the past. As it relates to how our black and brown brothers have, been pulled over. So we've tried town hall meetings, and it's a really hard question because we don't even know what works at the moment. We continue to try to build the bridge and to educate, our folks
Mm-hmm.
on what to do, on what not to do, and even having conversations with that police officer that says, I have a family, and the reality of this is that I'm going home. Somebody's going home tonight, and that's a harsh reality. But that's what that officer says. And then you got this young man, who, and I'll tell you this, Pastor Pollard. The issue has been for me, because I pastor an urban church, is that a lot of the guys that I've pastored the last 3 years did not have a father figure. And if they did have a father figure, he was in and out of the penal system, and so from the vantage point at which what they looked at the police officer as the bad, guy, was absolutely challenging too. So they didn't even have, or they don't have, a substantial raising. Their moms raised them, and now they're grown men, who have been basically, just pretty much, just saying, okay, it's okay, you can do this. But so the challenge has become, especially being an urban pastor, the challenge is, one, trying to father them, two, trying to educate them, three, trying to break some generational curses on the police side and in our young men. And so it's an absolute challenge. I would be remiss to say that it was something simple, but it's not. I think the church, even now, the world is we're in a tender place, and it's like if you say anything about race or culture, it's almost like a match has been lit, and people are just and so trying to not scratch an open wound, but how do we heal this wound? How do we take people from what's next after we protest? What's next? After we've done all of these things, now, we just voted here in Georgia. And so the question for me is that those same individuals that were doing all of the protesting and all of that, let's show up at the polls. Let's find out who's in our Senate seat. Let's find out who the individuals are, that are representing us, because that's going to enact, some change. But I do think having conversations and, with our young men and with our police officers, it is definitely a challenge, because again, the police officer may have forthcoming information about that particular young man that knows that he's been in and out of the penal system. So therefore, when he approaches him, again, the ideology is that I'm going home tonight, because I got a family as well. And so I've been praying and consulting with God, because as a father who has 5 sons, and I've shared this with many folks, I'm afraid, to that they're cute now, but one day they're going to be a threat. And so the fear of them one day transitioning from being cute to being a threat is a constant thing that rails in my mind as a pastor and a father.
Yeah, man, and that's I really appreciate that answer. I wasn't looking for a solution, but I appreciate the answer, because one thing, and the reason why I got a lot of you here on this line today, is because most of you are leaders in your own areas of influence, and people need to hear that we are leading through something that we're also dealing with ourselves, right? So while you're trying to bring understanding to a large congregation with different backgrounds, different views, different realities, you still have to wrestle with how you feel about it yourself, and you have to really pray to God to not only give you wisdom to lead these individuals from all these different backgrounds, but also to lead you in your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own emotions, and to help you to not make a decision that's based on your own bias. Right. And so I'm glad you responded to that the way you did. Now I want to go to Pastor Randy, because he has a diverse situation too. So not only is he the assistant pastor of his church, but he's also what I like to call one of the most influential ranks in the Marine Corps, which is a gunnery sergeant. And so he has people that he has to lead on both sides. One side where he's very restricted in his response, and the other side where he may have a little bit more freedom, but he also has to be cautious of his surroundings, his atmosphere, and their differing opinions, and the tenderness of how they're dealing with it as well. So let's hear from you, Pastor Randy.
Well, thank you, Pastor Pollard, for allowing me and to join you gentlemen here and sharing what's on our hearts. It's a hard time that we're dealing with right now. I heard about the murder of George Floyd, and just like you said, it was a numbing feeling. You hear about all these school shootings, and you hear about all these black men dying every other day. It almost seems as if, and it starts to become, you start to become numb to it. And I'm like, wait a minute, why am I becoming numb to something like this? This is terrible. But you hear about it so often that it's just when is it going to end? So you start to try to push it out of your mind. And then my wife, who's now expecting our child, and we just found out it's a boy, I'm terrified. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm terrified because just like you said, Pastor Tuck, they're gonna be cute, and then one day it's gonna be a phone call potentially. And then I'm in the Marine Corps, and I see these things. I see I listen to the conversations with the undertones, and I can't really say what I want to say because of the uniform that I'm wearing. I can't exactly go up to the ones that I want to address those because of the uniform and the position and the rank that I hold in comparison to what they are. But I don't think there's an answer right now. There's so many different. I think you said it best, Pastor Tuck. You said we don't want to scratch the wound, but honestly, I think the scab. George Floyd was the scab being ripped off.
Absolutely.
George Floyd was the scab being ripped off, and we have to perform that surgery while the wound is still fresh. When a finger or a limb gets amputated, you have to hurry up and get it back to the body before that piece dies away. And I think we're at the point where that piece needs to hurry up and get fixed. The different things that the government is doing right now, gotta watch what I say. But the different things that the government is doing right now, those are all just temporary. Those are all just to appease us. But it's really the answer. Some folks are trying to, you can see the confliction. I want to say certain things, but some folks are trying to get to certain positions, and they have to pander to a certain audience. What are we doing? We've become so numb to this. George Floyd wasn't just another guy that just got killed. He was a representation of 400 years of all of this stuff that's going on. And it's hard to explain it because someone asked me, he said, what's the church doing? You said, what's the church doing? What do you say, Pastor? I was like, I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Because, you hear people say, well, Jesus went in and flipped tables. Well, I'll be real with you. I want to do more than flip tables.
Right.
I do. But is that the answer? Who's to say? We can look at all the looters and we look at all the rioters and we say, well, they shouldn't be doing that. But you've seen it everywhere else. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, we got mad about that. What is it going to take for us to understand that this has to change? What is it going to take for other people to take it seriously? It's like when I don't have kids yet, but I grew up with a black mom from Jamaica, and when words weren't getting through to my head, I started to feel some things, and that's what it took to get me to understand. Okay, don't do that again. It's just like when you turn the stove on, you don't put your hand near the heat because you're gonna get burned, but you want to play around with it so much. Go ahead and put your hand on it. You're gonna get burned. It's the same thing that we're dealing with right now. And it's hard to juggle being a Marine and being a ministry leader, because the Marine in me wants to fight. The Marine in me wants to fight. Right. The ministry leader in me wants to say, we got to do this the right way. We got to be calm. We got to be. And then the future father in me wants to say, hold up, wait a minute. You're not about to take my son. You're not about to do that. So yes, we're conflicted. So honestly, if someone were to ask me, what are we supposed to do? I don't know. Because what we've been doing for 400 years hasn't been working.
Well, Hazel.
That's a very, very honest answer, Pastor Randy. And I appreciate everything you said. One of the things I think you brought up a really cool analogy. I would just deviate from that just a little bit, in that unlike a limb that got pulled off that would need to be reattached, the real issue I feel like with this country is there's a cancer that needs to be cut out, and it doesn't need to be reattached. And I say that in the case of, because what we're seeing is the manifestation afterward of the rioting and the looting in response to Mr. Floyd. But on the flip side of that, you're now seeing statues coming down and being thrown in. And you're seeing the conversation coming up about renaming military posts and glorifying this civil war, and flying a flag and things of that nature. You're starting to see that conversation coming out. And the problem is America never had a real conversation about their original sin. And until the Bible is very clear what it talks about when it comes down to sin. You must repent and then turn from it. America has never repented for the sin of slavery and the 400 years of systematic racism that has been done and perpetuated on its people of color. And the thing is that in so many cases, us being military, we understand this, is that we've gone overseas to fight wars and hold up this banner, when in America, we are guilty of many of the very same things that we've gone overseas to go over and fight for. We perpetuated civil and human rights issues against Black people. And the problem is, until you deal with that, you're going to have this level of anger. And so now America is making, because of the internet and so many people being combined together, the message is getting global that what you're preaching is not who you really are. And we're being held up to all those things that we said we were. When we got a statue that says, give us your tired, your poor, and your sick, but yet we turn everybody away. When we say, come here for the land of freedom and the land of liberty, and when they come, and the very people who built this country can't even find liberty and freedoms in the pursuit of happiness, there's a systematic problem that's going on. Until we deal with that, America's going to continue to have these problems. I think Pastor Tuck, you said something that I think was profound. On my heart has always been, mentoring young men. We've got a group of young men who are lions. They're not afraid, and they've watched generations of men who sat back and done nothing. They talk the great talk, but they have not done anything. From all our the people who've been perpetuated as leaders, and they have not physically done anything. What these young men, they're ready to fight, but they don't have leaders. So where we come in, Pastor Tuck and Pastor Randy and you, Cliff, and you, Pastor Pollard, where we come in is where we take these young lions and we teach them how to fight. You've got all the strength. You've got all the gall, but listen to some knowledge and let's teach them how to systematically go about making change, to talk to them about why it's important to vote, why it's important for criminal justice reform, why these things are so important, because when they can understand that, they're going to be the ones who's going to affect the real change. But we've got to talk how to harness. I tell people all the time, it's funny, like electricity. You take lightning, and when lightning strikes, it's this ball of energy that's not controlled. But you can take that same lightning, you can take the same fire, and when you control it, it can give you heat, it can give you electricity, it can give you so much stuff. So the thing is we learn how to take that electricity, that energy, and we harness it into something. But we can change the world. But the problem is these lightning strikes are happening all over. We're seeing them in Atlanta, and we need to figure out how we can harness that, root out this cancer that's in this country, and then we go from there. And that's where I'm pleasantly happy with the change that I'm seeing happen, because we're having tough conversations that we've never had before about who America has an opportunity to go two ways. We can either keep going down the same road of lies, or we can start to fix and heal the issues that we've had for years. Any abusive relationship, until you deal with the abuse, you can't go on in that relationship until you deal with the abuse. You can't go on beating your spouse and then all of a sudden saying, well, I'm a great husband. No. You got to deal with the abuse. And America's never dealt with the abuse that they've done to its people, its very own citizens. And we got to deal with it.
That was good.
I wanted to chime in on that too, because I agree with you as well. And again, when as a pastor who I actually assumed church from a Caucasian pastor, and the ideology of how they viewed him versus viewed me as an African American man was absolutely mind blowing. The idea of that I couldn't handle business the way he handled business. My work acumen wasn't as good as his. And and a lot of that stuff I endued from my own culture. And so I agree with what you said as it relates to us getting out, educating our guys, and I love the analogy about the lightning, taking that combustion and doing something with it, because we have a lot of guys who are smart, they're educated, and again, as an urban pastor, seeing them, I'm like, man, if you can move dope the way you move in this dope, and I can take, listen, if you can take that same concept and ideologies of how you move in this weight and go and do it in the stock market and go and do it, flip houses and do it in the business world, you will be an absolute beast. These guys, they, first of all, they might be hood, but they got great minds. Their minds are great. And I agree with you. In the challenge is what they've seen in the past, what they've been through in the past, and but taking that energy and that power, harnessing it, and saying, hey, you've used all of that over here, but I'm telling you, you can come over on this side, and they can't take anything, from you. Again, and Pastor Pollard, you touched on this, and then I'll be quiet, but it being an educated brother, doing everything, trying to check off all the boxes and do everything right. There's been moments, that I've been pulled over for the car that I drive, and people at the officer asked, well, what do you do? And well, why does it matter? Isn't my insurance good? I don't have any tail lights out, and so even in that is the question sometimes you ask yourself, is it ever enough? Is what I'm doing ever enough, as an African American man? And so I'm excited because I feel like finally the world is in a moment of revolution, and the world is we're just in a place where now we're having conversations that we never would have had. Every revolution had a martyr. Every revolution had a martyr. Jesus was the martyr for the revolution of us now talking about Christ 2,000 years later. Martin Luther King was a revolution of civil rights. Every revolution have a martyr. Now we have George Floyd as our martyr that has caused a revolution, for us to have a conversation, because now you've never seen corporations make statements about the African American community, but now we're in a chess game. But now we have to have conversations of what are we doing? What are we doing about the black dollar, the power of the black dollar? Because I talked about the African American community are the greatest consumers in the United States. We are one of the largest consumers here in the United States. And imagine if we stopped consuming items, going to Walmart, doing all of these things, supporting all of these great companies. And so that's why now you see companies again having conversations about, we love the African American community. Da 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 da. There's definitely a revolution taking place. I'll say this and I'll conclude. I've been excited because I've been seeing more, Brother Clifton, growing up in Coweta County. I've been seeing more Caucasian individuals protest than I have African American individuals, and that has been very enlightening for me. It is, but that shows you that there's a conversation that's happening now. There's a revolution that's happening now, that has never happened before. This has never happened before, and I believe it's a God thing. I do see God in this. Don't have all the, but I definitely see God.
You know what?
You ever think you see a time when NASCAR would have to concede having the Confederate flag in NASCAR?
You know what?
NASCAR has to stand up and listen, and a NASCAR car going around that says Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
That's one of the things I don't want to think when people say, well, what are we getting from this? I agree with, I think that most of you have been saying that we don't, the looting and definitely any lives been lost, whether it's blue lives or black lives or white lives, because we're seeing a lot all across the board, injuries and things of that nature. But again, through all of the violence and things of that nature, a conversation is being had. And so, like you say, Pastor Tuck, I see change. And again, to see God's hand in it, that's our part. We have to see God in every situation. So, yeah, definitely a good response. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Pastor William,
man.
I want to be very brief here. I just want to kind of touch on what my brother was just saying.
Oh, go for it.
And I want to ask a question of all of you guys real quick. What I hear coming from each one of you guys is the desire, and I could be wrong here, but I hear the desire for reconciliation. Am I correct in that? I hear a desire for reconciliation with our brothers. Yes, what has been happening with police officers and black people in this country is horrific. I hear a lot of my guys, they say, okay, look, it was an isolated incident. It's not isolated. I believe it is systemic. I believe that we are all a part of the body of Christ. And with that being said, we seek reconciliation, both with our white brethren, our white police officers, black police officers, whatever, just like our soul seeks reconciliation with Jesus Christ. And, like Pastor Tuck was just saying, I see things now that I've never seen before. And, it's been a challenge, though, for me, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of my colleagues at work, I'm speaking specifically about my white colleagues, they don't want to have the conversation. And I'm still trying to understand why they didn't want to have the conversation. For whatever reason, maybe they're uncomfortable, or maybe they feel like I'm trying to accuse them of being racist, which of course I'm not. But what I desire of my brethren at the police department and all around the country is recognition. It's like, I'm not accusing you of perpetrating racism. I'm not saying you're a racist, but if we're going to have reconciliation between one another, we have to have truth. And what I hear you guys saying is like, man, like my soul yearns for reconciliation with my brother. Yes, my brother's a police officer. Yes, my brother's a pastor. Yes, my brother's a lawyer. Yes, my brother's a doctor. We seek reconciliation. And I personally hope that we can have more conversations like this because, it's hard for people like me and you guys, you're in the military, you have to watch what you say and who you say it to and things like that. But I think that's part of the problem, though, that we can't be transparent in our feelings and in our thoughts. It's not that you're trying to demonize military or trying to paint everybody in the military with a broad stroke or everybody in police work, but you are trying to call out, and especially as Christians, we have a responsibility to call out things, especially when they're wrong. When they're wrong, if we call ourselves Christians, we have to say that's wrong because we seek reconciliation. Do y'all agree with that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what?
Absolutely.
You know what? I was watching a video a few weeks ago, man, and there was three individuals, and these three individuals represented three generations. There was one old man that was, and you guys probably saw this video. There was one old man, I think he was 41 years old, and he was supporting, the anger, the riots, the burning stuff, and all of that. There was another gentleman that was 31 years old that was trying to stop him and tell him this isn't the way. And while stopping him, the older gentleman was saying, "Well, I've tried every other way. Nothing has worked. I'm tired. I'm frustrated." And the 31-year-old was telling him, that's not the way. And then he, instead of him having a solution, he looked at the younger 16-year-old that was there, and he said, "Don't be like him. I'm giving this to you." So, do you guys think that this problem, this curse, and I'll use the word, this generational curse that we're having on all sides, do you think it is something that is just being pushed down from generation to generation? Because this is what we see. We see, and somebody was talking about how, I think it was Randy who said, we just don't have the answer. We've tried everything. I see, in 2012, I think it was, we all wore the hoodie for Trayvon Martin. And then, Eric Garner, we all couldn't breathe, right? And then, after that, there was something else, and there was something else. And then, right now, I think they're wearing the recycled shirts from Eric Garner that says we can't breathe. And we're trying to come up with a way. And even in this, there's people that say, this isn't the way. No matter what you do, they're saying this isn't the way. They're saying Colin Kaepernick, you kneeled, you peacefully protested. That wasn't the way. They're saying, you know, these riots, uh, these violent protests aren't the way. And even some people are saying, you know, the protests in general aren't the way. You know, get these people out of the way. Let's go back to work and all this stuff. It seems to be that we're recycling different methods. But I like what I believe it was Pastor Tuck said, is that he's seeing something different that we haven't seen before, which is we have the guys that represent the money that's speaking on our behalf. And a lot of people, I feel, think or have the idea that the money is going to be the way to go. But then it turns my mind back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? When we had the economic freedom, we had the liberty, and then one thing ignited the match that started the destruction of that economic power. So with that, with all I said, all of that to say this, we're doing all these different methods, but I think that Tony had it right when he said it's a cancer that needs to be cut out. It's spiritual and it's mental, right? Because even if all of these methods work, if we get all of these companies on our side, at the end of the day, what's going to be the match that ignites the next moment of destruction? You know what I mean? What's going to be that match that starts the next march, the next protest, the next whatever, you know? And we're going to be all, you know, doing it again. So what's y'all's thoughts on that?
Well, you know, when he made the comment about the cancer, and I think that is my strongest point right there is the cancer. Because as long as we don't address the root cause of it all, it's going to keep coming back. So I completely and 100%. And there was a couple other things. We talked about the church's role and the police's role and all this. And one thing that I think is there are a lot of traditions and ways along the lines of what you're saying that we pass down from generation to generation. It could be good intentions behind it, but I think a certain mentality we breed into our children. That a kind of a that's just the way it is kind of a thing. I mean, for me, I'm almost 47. I have 3 sons and 2 grandsons. So when you asked the question in the beginning, you know, how did I feel? My first initial was, how do I keep explaining this? How do I keep justifying the peaceful protest? My opinion on the protest is the protests have always been peaceful. The protest wasn't a problem. It would happen once the protest started that turned the protest into the riots. I believe that everything happens for a reason, but we have got to go way, way back. And that's why when I hear people saying now about how they're tired of the fight, we only been in this for a couple of weeks. And I don't think that we're even close to getting to where we have to continue to push and drive to keep the focus on that initial thing that he so eloquently put about the cancer. If we start focusing on who's boycotting and who's doing this, I think that can be somewhat of a distraction, because at the end of the day, what you just said about Tulsa is what my concern is. If we don't have a serious power shift, who makes the decisions in this country, any given time, what is given can be taken away. If we look at our history from the time we were enslaved, when we were supposed to be free, to Emancipation Proclamation and all kind of other agreements, it's always been backed out on. So I don't think we've got to the place yet where we're starting to talk about way down the road. I just think that we're at a place now where we have to continue to refocus the issue from the police level, church level, every group. We have to keep the attention on what the true underlying issue is and why these things keep coming up. For me personally, I think what's happening is that those generations are being bred off, so to speak. The long-turning traditions of racism. We have a younger generation who don't believe. I think in my generation, our generation, we kind of question those ideas and some of those concepts. But now we in that generation now that's pushing it and saying, no. this is not the way it's going to be, and we've had enough. So to speak, in order for that cancer to be continued to remove, what we have to do is not keep trying to reinstitute those old ways and those old policies. When I heard the term about norm, we can't go back to the norm. There will never be that. I don't want to go back to that. We have to go move on, start over. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of direct and open, honest dialogue like we're having right now. I speak with a lot of passion. I try to tell people all the time, I don't mean, direct at anybody, but I think that everybody has to now let the fire burn. I think we focus on so much about putting the fire out. We focus on the rioters and the looters. First of all, I firmly believe that we didn't start the fire, so then it's not my responsibility to put the fire out. I talk about mentality. You can't go out on the streets and try to tell a man who on a day or a woman on a day-to-day basis who's getting beat down, drugged, and robbed by their own people, and then when the people who's supposed to protect them show up, and then I say trust, you can't get somebody to trust. We have to be able to provide for those basic needs. And I think at the very, very bottom of it all is that cancer. When I look at a man or a woman or a man look at one another and they don't first see a human being, until we can address that issue and continue to drive that point home, I think we're gonna spin our wheels. I've seen a lot of these movements. I've seen a lot of this stuff happen in my time, but it being sustainable and us not settling and taking like what I consider like little tokens or gestures, we need long-term legislative reform in this country. Or anytime we can right back to that primitive state. So again, I completely agree in that cancer and educating it from the church level and stop teaching a lot of traditions and a lot of things that can inadvertently create a subservient mindset. They think that people confuse the words, in my opinion, the words of meekness and weakness. We are supposed to be a meek people, but we're not a weak people. And I think sometimes those definitions get a little bit convoluted in their delivery. Again, not intentionally, but that's just the way, that I see it. So I think that the idea also of the centralization, we got to centralize. Because if we have something going on in LA and something going on in this state and something going on here, until we have that unity, and I heard everybody talking about the need for a leader, that's exactly what we need. We need somebody to pull it through and to have that one body that speaks on behalf of us. And then we can have the other people on the other side of this table send their representatives, and then we say, hey, this is our list of demands. I think I was Killer Mike that came up with his points and stuff like that. I don't agree with everything, but a lot of it we have to start demanding. The time for me personally of asking, we passed that stage. I think we need to reinvest into our communities. We need to reinvest in who we are as a people, not preaching or talking separatism. I'm talking equality. And the only way people of power respect your position is they see you as an equal. And we will never be seen as an equal until we shift the power base in the country.
That's a real interesting conversation to bring up because we could talk about. I hear Tulsa, Oklahoma come up quite a bit, and and I one of the most egregious things that I think about that is for many years, after slavery, and then as we were trying to find our foothold in this nation, in many cases when we couldn't come in the front door, we tried to create our own. So we created Tulsa, Oklahoma. We created colleges in which we could go to because we couldn't get into the Harvards and the Yale. So we created the Morehouses and the Spelmans, and we created the Black Wall Street because they wouldn't let us on Wall Street. And so we did all those things. But the crazy thing is as our things started to get successful, they destroyed our things. So we were saying we just want to equal. And one of the craziest things is I'm glad I got out of the South and the Army had an opportunity to see me, and now me being in the Midwest, I always had a thought process of how schools and stuff work. And we always saw the images of, I used to wonder why the Brown versus Board of Education happened in Kansas, and I got a chance to tour the museum. Down south, we used to see the black schools used to be just a shack, where the white schools were much greater. But the funny part is how out here in the Midwest and out here in Kansas, you couldn't tell the difference between the white school and the black school. So the idea of separate but equal, they actually had it, which is why the change had to happen here. It didn't happen down south because so we talk a lot about stuff about equal, but there's a difference between equality and equity. So when you take a person and you've been here and the person has been here, but I give you both the same thing, it still might not. It's not gonna be equitable because I'm so far behind you. You know, I think I heard it said one time, if you take a fence and it's 6 foot tall and you got a 6 foot man and a 5 foot man, and you give them a foot stool to stand on, that 5 foot man still can't see over that 6 foot fence. So the problem is for so many years, and again, we hear about, you know, many of the people who will say things like, well, I wasn't the one who enslaved anybody, I didn't have anything to do, but you have generationally prospered from the effects of what that's done. So now I've been behind this curve. When you could do land expansion to the west, and your forefathers could go out and just plot his own land, I had to work on that land. You know, my forefathers had to work on that land. So America has to deal with the inequity problem that we have as well too. Because and then again, I look at it from the standpoint of, I think I heard you say something that, I mean, again, you're just sparking all this stuff to my head. We talk about history like it's been so long ago. We got to remember. You know, I often, when I'm talking to my children, when I'm talking to my children, or even any children I'm dealing with, I use, for an example, I use my mother, who I don't know if my mother, well, you know my mom, she's not old at all.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother was born in 56. And I have to use, when I give my kids a date, I have to give them, oh yeah, let me tell you something. Your grandmother was 3 when this happened. Oh yeah, about it. And they're like, wow, because when history gets taught, many times they're taught like it was ancient history. But my mother was on the planet when Dr. King got killed. So we got to think about it from that standpoint. So if we still have people who have residual from that, the traumas that have happened, the same way some of them are teaching us how to deal with the traumas that they dealt with. So for instance, anybody who was a great-grandchild of anybody that dealt with Tulsa, you can imagine what the trauma they had to teach their children and their children's children, and how that's come along as well too. And us being military, we know how post-traumatic stress syndrome can do to, as African Americans, as a culture, we're dealing with post-traumatic stress because we're dealing with the things that we've seen. I'm so glad that one of the things that's come from this whole rioting thing is they're finally, after 32 years, getting rid of that TV show Cops.
Yeah.
I'm sick of 32 years of watching, you know, black men and white beaters being chased down by cops. And if you don't think that images matter, all you have to do is go to the very book that each one of us preach from. The Bible constantly talks about the vision and what we see. And so the imagery of what we put in the heads of people for 32 years, that if you talk a little white kid and a little black kid from 3 or 4 years old, 32 years later, those are your cops on the force now who've watched this very imagery. So when they're pulling over somebody and one guy looks a certain way and one looks another, if you don't think that image has done something to them, we're fooling ourselves. We're not having an honest conversation. So shows like that, First 48 and things of that nature, that show us in these lights, you know, it matters, you know. And so I think we have to, again, I'm with you on that whole revolution has to take place. I mean, we got to change the system from the inside out. You know, start demanding that the images that they show of us have to look a certain way. That we, you know, we have some input in that. Again, voting is, so I heard that come up again. You know, we hear how many brothers we hear say things like, man, it don't matter who we vote for. And I'll tell the brother all day long, if it don't matter, they wouldn't keep it from me so bad. Look at what's happening down to you guys in Georgia right now, where on one side of town, you got a no-wait line to get in. And then on the African-American side of town, there's people out waiting 4 or 5 hours to get in. If you don't think that that's systematic, if you don't believe that that's systematic, that to keep you from voting. So I tell people all the time, if you don't do nothing but vote to honor your grandparents who couldn't vote, go do it. If you don't do it for nothing else because you love me and you care about who my commander-in-chief is, go vote. If nothing else for those reasons. So we gotta push that narrative, not just for the president, but during midterm elections, when our judges, because those are the ones who our children are standing in front of. Those are the ones who our police chiefs and things of that nature. And man, so until we start getting that mindset that we've got to be a part of the process to change the process, we're gonna, and not just because we energize because the person looks a little bit like us. We gotta vet these candidates, stop giving them away. I'm so glad I'm an independent, not a Republican or a Democrat, because I don't claim either one. I am an independent on my voter registration card. Yes, because if I'm going to give my vote to the Democrats, I expect you to hold something up. Every other section of America tells their political party what they want, what they expect from them. We're the only ones to only accept a politician coming to our churches on an election, standing up in front of us, and we say, hey, here we go. Negative. What is your agenda for the African American community that you're going to be over? I need to hear an agenda. And if we don't hear an agenda, I'm holding my vote. I'm not giving it to you. I'm tired of giving it away. And so there's a lot of different ways that we've got to approach these problems and stop just being being moved by any wave of emotion that comes along, and learn how to be strategic in what we do. And until we can get that message out, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels. We're gonna keep spinning.
You're so right with that, man.
I think something great you just.
Oh, go ahead, Randy. Go ahead.
I think something great that you just said. When politicians are coming around and they're looking for your vote, and something else I thought about was when all these different events are happening, when the Ahmaud Arbery's are happening, when the George Floyd incidents are happening, when the believe it or not Amadou Diallo, when I was in New York City, a guy reaching for his wallet got shot 40-something times. When all these different things are happening and then they begin to fade away, a prominent activist said just a couple of days ago, he said, when the last news truck is gone, we're going to be right here with you. What do we do? What do we do as men, as the guys on the ground, not the big 50 million followers, not those guys, but the grassroots guys? What do we do to keep the fire burning when all the media stops covering it, when people stop talking about it, when Black Lives Matter is not trending anymore on Instagram and Facebook? What do we do? How do we keep that fire burning? Because just like you said a little earlier, this has been going on for a long time, but generationally, we've been taught to get mad about it right when it happens, and then it just goes away. So, and then something else happens, and we get mad about it, and it goes away. How do we keep that fire burning in order to effect change?
I really would like Pastor Tuck to kind of speak on that, because if I'm correct, aren't you involved in your local chapter of the NAACP?
I was.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I actually was when I was in Coweta County, but since I've transitioned to Clayton County, not so much, but still definitely lending my hand with helping with all of those things. Again, the challenge again becomes educating folks, throwing that information out there and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we are. There was something that I think Timothy said that really, really touched me when he talked about the traditionalism. Me being a preacher's kid, growing up in the church. If we know nothing, we know traditionalism. But I think there has to be a conversation of how African Americans ended up in what we call the Christianity, that whole doctrine, what church looked like. One of the scriptures again that they used to use, obey your master for this is right. And we, as an African American culture, obeyed master for that was right. And then we adopted a lot of the ideologies that were created in the Western culture, the Western church, which is what we have now. Because now the question is, a lot of people have been asking, where are all of the white evangelicals? Who, where are they now? You don't hear them saying anything. And so, again, the question is breaking traditionalism in our churches and really having those hard conversations about why we do what we do, as a church. And, again, getting into those communities and really educating our folks. Because I think a lot of times we look for simple and easy. One of the greatest things about COVID-19 is that God forced the church out of four walls.
Yeah.
And he pushed us to this place called social media, and now we're reaching unfamiliar people who would have never set foot in our church, who would have never looked at us, who would have never given us the time of day. They're now talking to us, we're conversing with them, but that's because God got us out of what we worship, which was the edifice. Centuries ago, the Moses, the Aarons, all of them, when they built temples for God, Solomon, when he built the temple for God, now we build our temples for people. And now, look at how we converse, we do what we do. It becomes the challenge for the church becomes, what have we been doing? Right. We've become personalities. We've become celebrity. We've become all of these things as our people are dying. We've become rich as our people are still, because the reality of it is, if people don't want to change, and a lot of times, like I said, the church has to go back to being responsible as well, because I feel as though that we play a role in not educating our folks the way we should, because again, civil rights was able to do what they were able to do because of the church, but the church is now taking a back, and we're no longer community. Now we're a business.
Right. Yeah.
And so when the community, when the business, when the church that again, we help raise Johnny's son, and we help do all of these things, but now, it's about, it's no longer about the community. It's about, what is the bottom line? How many people are we going to do? What are your numbers? What is this? What is your revenue for the week? And again, I feel as though that God has pushed the church now back to being the church that He's really called us to be, which is that community church. Because I always say to preachers, if you are not in your community, then your church. And I understand handling business, because again, I do pastor a mega church. But when your church doesn't do anything in the community, then the question has to become, what is that church now become? You're no different from Walmart or Target.
Yeah. Pastor Tuck, that's so true. And it all comes back to educating our people and getting our people on the front line. And I don't think you can have this conversation without including the black church, right? And I say the black church specifically, and I'm going to tell you why. The black church has always been at the forefront of all the movements with our people. We see in slavery where the black church was the headquarters for people to make plans to get out of slavery. We see the black church was the focal point. It was the initiator of the civil rights movement. And I think in this, the black church is going to have to go back to its roots. And one thing you hit it spot on when you talked about what COVID-19 has kind of pushed us into. And just as a little side note, don't forget COVID-19 still exists. I had a coworker whose mom died earlier this week of COVID-19. But it's put us in a position to where, as preachers, let me take that back. It put us in a position where we have to become more pastoral than we have to be preachers, right? And then we'd have to be businessmen. And that's one of the things I've learned being a new pastor, and I'm grateful for, is the fact that I went straight into a time where I had to go straight into being a pastor, right? I didn't get the time to focus on, coming up with the perfect sermon series and marketing schemes and all this thing. I went straight into, all right, I'm pastoring these folks who have family members living in New York, which was ground zero, or I'm having people that I'm talking to people that are in Japan, displaced from their families in the States, who are being affected by COVID. And now I'm dealing with people who are trying to deal with this, but they're so detached from it. So you're right. It's gonna have. You can't mention things like this without mentioning the church and its responsibility in it. Because the reason for that is because God is in control, and we're the representatives of God down here. I know I've had you guys a very long time, so I'm gonna switch fields real quick, right? And then hopefully we'll be able to close this out pretty soon, right? Did somebody say they had something to say? I thought I heard somebody.
No, I'm saying it's good talk, though. It's good talk.
Okay.
It really is.
So I'm gonna switch fields, right? And let me put this disclaimer out there, because a lot of us are military, and we got some cops on here. So don't I don't want this to become a political argument, or you to say something that might um, that might get you into a situation that you don't want to be in. But you also can't address this without addressing some of the political stuff, right? Um, so a few weeks ago, we heard Joe Biden say he was on the Breakfast Club, right, and he was talking to Charlemagne the God. And I have my own opinion to this that's probably different from what you guys think. But I'm gonna tell you after I hear from you guys. Joe Biden made a comment. He said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. What did you guys feel when you heard that?
And I think that was a part of that whole tradition thing that I was talking about. Because historically speaking, that is the way we were taught. You black, you a Democrat. So it was a stupid statement, first of all. I mean, but the side of it that I looked at, and it made me go have to scratch my head, because sometimes people don't look at the candidate. All they see is the color of the ballot or the poll, and they say, well, my grandma, my great grandpa, whoever, we all voted Democrat. Democrats before our side, and they just slide in. So I think in every statement there is an element of truth. It's all depending on how you look at it. So I think when he said the statement, I wish he maybe could have talked to somebody before he let those words come out of his mouth. But that is a part of that unlearning process that I was referring to. There has to be individual accountability and people doing their due diligence. And if you don't do it that way, if we aren't teaching people, hey, you know what, start reading some of these bills and laws and stuff before you just start putting in. See how they're voting on things of that nature. So I think there was some truth in what he said, no matter how stupid it was, but it's something that we have to talk about. And I'm glad that you bringing it up, because a lot of people just some silly statement that he made. No. There is some truth, and that is something that we, as a community, as African Americans, as minorities, as they call us in this country, we have to start dispelling those kind of things. Because if he said it, he must believe it, and I'm guaranteeing you that he has other African Americans around his circle that encourage him to make that particular statement. So until we just say, that's not the way we playing the game, we can't get completely 100% and dump all of the accountability and responsibility of what he said. Because I think there is a portion that we play into that myth that we got to be Democrats because of the color of our skin.
Mm-hmm. You hit the nail right on the head when you said that, because it is typical. If you know anything about Joe Biden, you know that he's going to say the first thing that comes to his mind, no matter how dumb it is. And clearly, whatever came out of his mind was in his head. And just like you said, it is generational for black people to vote Democrat. It is. So exactly what he said was exactly what he meant, based off of what we've been doing. We had no idea what Barack Obama's policies were before he ran for president. We had no idea. But because he was black, everybody jumped on that train. I'm not saying anything good or bad about him. What I'm saying is we wanted somebody black in the White House, and that's who we chose because it was the only option we had. Now, Joe Biden here is using those coattails to get himself in there. So, of course, if you are not in your right enough mind to vote for Joe Biden, who was the vice president of the first African American president of the United States, you ain't black. That's exactly what he meant when he said it. And you know how we say now, he said what he said.
Oh, yeah. a lot of my colleagues on the whole context of everything. And there's not a disagreement with anything that either one of you gentlemen said, because I think you're spot on. I just think Joe Biden was comfortable. He got a little comfortable. Because when you high-fiving and dapping up the first black president, when you hanging in them circles, he just got real comfortable. And he's having a conversation with Charlemagne on the black radio station. And when we're talking about what we're looking at two different sides, well, one of them seems to have done very many things that have been egregious toward the African American community. His response was, if you decide to go this way, right, how you gonna call yourself black? And he summed up in the quick, if you don't vote for me, you black. You ain't black. I think he just got a little too comfortable. And that I see the same thing. Again, I looked at the Democrats who, when they did the historic vote not too long ago, but they came in the Kente cloth. once again, we used to say things like, good initiative, poor judgment. At the end of the day, I get your initiative, but that was poor judgment. You didn't have to put on the kente cloth to do what you did. Go in and make legislation. Let your words be the actions. I don't need you to put on no soap for me. I don't need you to put on no blackface for me. I don't need you to do any of that. Go in and do what the people have elected you to do and what your constituents are asking for. And that's where I feel like Joe got comfortable, because he just feels like he's gonna ride in on that black wave that's coming. And that was because that would have been something that if a black and said it, we wouldn't have had any issue with it. He felt in that moment, he felt like he was Uncle Joe. Not he thought black. Somebody needs to say, hey, all right, hey, dog, hey, chill out. That part. Somebody need to put one of his trusted advisors and say, all right, dog, hey, chill out. You're getting a little too comfortable. A little too comfortable.
So here,
most of my colleagues, they just, well, both white and black, they dismissed it as satire. I was like, you got to know Joe Biden. You know what I'm saying? Like he meant every word of that, like without question. And actually, me and Pastor William were kind of talking very briefly on Facebook earlier. We were kind of discussing the anomaly known as Candace Owens.
Oh, we're gonna get there too.
Oh my God! Oh man! But her movement entitled Blexit, for me, is inherently divisive, and I don't believe that black people need to be told who and who not to vote for. We don't. Nobody likes to be lectured to. You know what I'm saying? But many of us need to be educated. And so, it's just like in this whole situation right now with, police brutality and systematic racism and things like that. I expect each and every one of you guys, and even people on the outside, to hold me accountable for what I do out here in the streets as a police officer. Well, you know what? Hold Joe Biden or whoever wins these offices, hold their feet to the fire. Hold them accountable. I don't care if you vote Democrat or Republican. Just make sure that if they don't do it like you're saying, they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, vote them out. I don't want to hear nothing about hey, look, my vote doesn't count. They're not going to do what they said. They all tell lies and stuff like that. Look, I don't want to hear that. We hold the power. And so I see a lot of these people in the black community, they say, well, I don't never vote. 30, 40-year-old people ain't never voted a day in their life, but yet they complain about the conditions that they live in. And so I don't care. You know what? Look, I'm an independent, but I'm going to tell you something. If David Perdue or if my mayor or my city council person does not do what they say they're going to do for me, then I will not be voting for them. It's as simple as that. And so when you have a Candace Owens that gets on television and likes to demonize those who vote Democrat, which is counterproductive. It doesn't help the black community, even though she thinks she's helping somebody. She's really not. And pardon me, guys, but she's making herself look like a fool. And I'm just going to put it out there. It's just another form of subjugation to me, because she's essentially what people like her are doing. She's trying to tell us what to think. She's trying to tell us what to think instead of telling us how to think. And I have a huge issue with that. So,
yeah, I was gonna bring up Candace Owens, and I guess we'll get into it. But let me continue this thought about Joe Biden's thing, because I really wanted to share this.
Pastor William, I apologize to interrupt. I've actually got to get in service right now. I'm actually being called to duty, guys. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to take an exit real quick.
Hey.
I have enjoyed this thoroughly. I hope y'all continue. I'm sure y'all going to continue without me, but I hope that we can do this again.
Blessings, man. Blessings to you. Hey, go out and serve and protect.
I'm already Facebook friends with Pastor William. I know I'm Facebook friends with Eric. I think me and Pastor Tucker are already Facebook friends. The rest of you guys, look me up, man. Let's connect and let's talk on an individual basis, all right?
All right. Yeah, so I wanted to finish this thought about what I thought about Joe Biden, because I think it's important perspective that perhaps you all might have not thought about as much, but this is what I thought initially, right? So when I saw it, I typically, when I see clips of videos, I'll go back and I'll try to watch the whole interview, which is what I did when I saw that. And it reminded me of a story in the not too distant past. So a few months ago, quite a few months ago, my wife and I decided to invite this group to our church to do a presentation. It's a group that goes around the world, kind of a missionary group, but they go around the world and they do productions, Christian productions. Um, their performers are primarily white, and they did a great job. I'm not going to say the name of the group because they're a really good group and they did a good thing. But what happened is similar to the Joe Biden situation. So after church, they did a great production. Standing ovation. Um, it was so good to the point where I just, instead of preaching afterwards, I summarized the message and we called it quits. Um, so afterwards, my wife and I had an engagement to go to. So typically we would take our guests out to eat, but this time we decided to have food at the church. And so some food was prepared, and we invited them to partake in the food. And I'm doing the pastoral thing. I'm walking around, shaking hands, greeting everybody, and that type of thing. And my wife is having a conversation with one of the actors who was part of the production, a white lady. And what I noticed was her whole demeanor changed. Not anything bad, but it changed. It simply changed. Her mannerisms changed. The way she talked changed. The things she talked about changed. And what came to my mind is why did it change? And so when I watched Joe Biden, and I've met Joe Biden in person, and I've shook hands with him. He's given me a coin and all those things, and I've listened to him talk. When I saw the video with him and Charlemagne the God, um, Tony, you said the perfect word. You said he got comfortable. And but when I see that, his mannerisms change, what he talked about changed, how he talked changed. Um, and what I thought was why, when people talk to people of our complexion, it's almost as if they have to dumb down who they are.
Right.
And you kind of captured this a little bit, Pastor Tuck, when you talked about um, how you had to deal with the struggle of people wondering if you were going to be um, as business savvy and run the church in the way that your predecessor did. So there's a mindset that was revealed with the whole Joe Biden thing, and that mindset is something that still remains in the culture of America, and that is that black people and people of color are sometimes seen as not as educated, as not as smart. And so when I'm talking to them, I have to come down to their level so that I can relate to them. And that's what I got out of it. And the question that I have is, how do we fix that? Because now Charlemagne the God, I can't speak for him because I think he didn't go to college or whatever. But there's a lot of us on here that are educated, that have degrees, that have experiences. But I can guarantee that we've encountered things like that where people have had to come down, felt like they had to come down to our level.
But that's kind of okay. No,
I've heard the term, fucking white.
Uh-oh, who's gonna talk first?
I'm going mute. Let Tim go. Go ahead.
I think that was Mike that was going to start talking. Well, we ain't really heard from Mike, so I'll let him go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say something because you said something earlier about unlearning, and I've been thinking about that because in order for us, for everybody to reframe their minds, you have to unlearn these old ways of thinking. Like if it like, for example, Joe Biden, for example, if he got comfortable, that kind of thing, because that's what he sees, or that's been in his his mindset for so long, and so many other examples just racism. I mean, geez, that video that you said earlier with the three generations, I posted that one too because that hit me so hard. You know, like we're in 2020 and we're still dealing with the same problems that supposedly should have been so much better, you know, after the civil rights movement in the 60s. And Jesus, 70 years later, and we're still dealing with the same thing. And there's still so many people in this country that has not opened up or even admitted to the fact that, you know, we still are dealing with racism and all this bias and prejudice. And unless, even if they engage in a conversation, if they are not unwilling to or unable to unlearn what they have known all their lives, there's no real education on what the new way of thinking is going to be. They're not going to be able to fully accept what, you know, what's right in front of them. That's what I was thinking when he said about the unlearning, and you gave that example about Joe Biden, and Tony said about something about the him being comfortable. And I've been reading, one of the things I wrote in my paper one time about the reframing of minds is kind of like just that. It's so hard for people to change because they're unable to unlearn what they've known all their life and actually get educated and relearn, you know, from the get-go. I mean, from scratch, you know, like, I don't know, it's just astonishing to me that, again, we're in 2020 and we're still dealing with this problem. Like, I don't even know what to say. You know, I don't know what to do. That's why, you know, I was so glad that you invited me to stay. I want to learn more.
Awesome.
Tim, you like the bitch down there, man.
I'm telling you, man, this is like, before we got ready to do this, just not take up too much time, you know, we were getting ready to do it, and one of the light bulbs, you know, in my ceiling fan was out. I had to go to Walmart, and my dog wouldn't kept whining, and I was almost at the point like, man, I got so much stuff going on. I'm gonna do it. But this was meant for me to be in the presence of you, because it is so hard. People always talk about they want to talk, but they really don't want to talk, because in order to talk, you got to have receptive minds. Like Mike was just saying, you have to be willing to open your mind up. So to be in this kind of environment, even though we're not physically together, I firmly believe when the Spirit said we're two or more gathered, He's in the midst. This connection, you know, is that time that our minds are being open and being fertilized. And a question that you asked, Will, about how do we fix it, in particular to Joe Biden, is that first, people close to him, like us, and minorities, they have to start checking that kind of behavior. The laughing it off and just saying, oh, that's just how Joe is, and this, that, and the other, or giving them label like he's just, you know, a light-skinned a light-skinned brother and stuff like that. You know, we have to start to curtail that and say, hey, wait a minute, because you can tell when somebody is talking down to you. I can be in the presence of somebody and be having a conversation, and I can tell when that tone shifts and you start trying to talk to me like I'm not very intelligent. And there's a tactful way. I'm not saying go out and start punching people and knocking people and become that quote-unquote angry black man, but there is a polite way and a tactful way you can let people know that there's a line that you just don't cross. And that is the second part. We have to stop promoting that stereotype. There's a part of it that we have to take ownership of not being intelligent people, because I can walk out in the street sometime and I can see people and I'll be like, you know, I don't know if I want to be a brother right now because of the way people are behaving. So two parts. One, we got to hold people accountable for the way they treat us, and then we have to hold ourselves accountable for the things that we say we're willing to accept and we're willing to be treated. You can't. I remember Bishop Page always have this saying, you know, it's a sad dog that don't wag his own tail sometimes. You know, you have to be confident in being, you know, a black man. And when I draw that line in the sand when I'm talking to whoever, it's not because I think that your race is inferior to mine. I'm just proud of being. I'm just talking about how good I love and how I feel it is to be a black man. So I think that we have to take ownership just as much as we want to look at other people for the way they talk to us and the way they treat us. We have to take ownership of, okay, am I inviting this kind of behavior? You can't get mad at Joe when this man was the vice president of the United States of America and nobody in that circle ever told him, hey, Joe, you need to chill, man. That was racist. Or at the very least, it's prejudicial what you just said. I think in the beginning when I jumped in the conversation, people talk about the difference between the words that we use. People have preferences. People have prejudice. People are racist, and then they become an extremist group of things. But there's levels to that. I just think that Joe just needed somebody to put him to the side at a younger age and say, hey, Joe, why are you talking? When you start talking, brothers have to lean on back during the press conferences, and you got to start talking and slang. His whole body language changed. He's trying to get that little cool kind of a Bill Clinton kind of a swag tune or whatever the case may be. I don't know what it is, but to me, it can be somewhat disrespectful because my father raised me that I need to be able to survive in any environment that I'm in. When I'm hanging out with my friends or whatever, yeah, I might be cool or whatever the case may be. But when I walk in and I put my uniform on, I walk in and I'm commanding the same amount of respect as everybody else that has that uniform on. And in that, in particular, I walk on a military base. I still work out on base. And I see the way some African-American guys wear their uniform. I've been retired now for over 4 years now. And I still stop them. Hey, bro, come here, let me talk to you for a minute. And they see, the facial hair, and they know I'm retired. And I started talking about, you know how many people died for you to have a right to wear that uniform? You got people out here fighting for you to treat it fairly, for you to do the evaluations properly, and all this other stuff. You walk around and you acting like a clown. You don't respect yourself, but you want somebody else to respect you. You don't want to respect the position you're in, but you want somebody else to respect you. So I just think that accountability on both sides is what we need to focus on. We need to police ourselves as a community, and we also need to let other people know that there is a line in the sand, and it just is not negotiable. It's never funny to cross that line.
Awesome.
I'm gonna make 2 points that I think that in my feeling for this. I mean, we can't. I'm a guy who likes to pull nature into how things go, and black is the inclusion of all colors, right? So even in our communities, we've always been the community where anyone could come and we would just take them in. And I think that goes back, even if you go back into slavery, it was our mothers who were nursing white babies. And so we've always taken in, back in the day when an interracial couple would get married and daddy would kick her out the community. Where did she come? She came to the black community, and it would always be inclusive. So we've always been that way, and we did the very same thing the minute, if you go back through history, we, after Franklin Roosevelt and, the certain people, we started naming our children Roosevelt. We will bring people into our community. We've been the people who are doing that. And, people have always joked and said Bill Clinton was the first black president because he played a saxophone on Arsenio Hall, and that's our instrument is a saxophone. So we've always been that type. So again, when I go back to my original statement saying that Joe was just comfortable, we pulled Joe in, made him feel comfortable, and he got a little. And so what had to happen is, I remember when as a child, we would be in adult conversations, and I'm sure Pastor Tuck, we're coming from where we came from. We get to talking with grown folks. Grown folks will tell you in a minute, all right, boy, you get beside yourself now. So they slap her back and say, hey, fix yourself, right? Somebody needed to slap Joe's hand and say, hey, sir, fix yourself. That comment, I get where you're coming from, but that comment, that one wasn't for you. But I'll say this, and then I'm gonna I went to school, and I wouldn't even call the school a predominantly white high school. I went to a white high school. I was out of, over 500 some people graduate. It was 4 of us that graduated with them. So what ended up happening was I did get a very good education, but one of the things that I found out and I learned was, first of all, we're not a one-size-fit-all people. We come in all shapes, sizes, and all kind of things. Even if you start to include our Afro-Latino individuals who sometimes don't even want to, include us, we are so many from East to Dominican to Puerto Rican to whatever. We come in so many different, so there's no one-size-fit-all for black people. But the problem is in the minds of people, they have put us into this one block, and they think of us that way. And the reason I say that as well too is because what I've come to find out that many of the people that I grew up with, when they got to know me, rather than say that there could be other black people like me, they said I was the exception to the rule. instead of thinking that wow, it could be other black people that think like Tony thinks. Tony's the exception to the rule, and all the rest of them are like this. So while they could treat me a certain way, they would feel. So that's when you start to see the people like the Candace Owens and everyone that a pander, and they can get accepted because they're different than the rest of them. If y'all would just think like this one, it would be okay. And I think part of the problem is, again, is that we get put into this box to think that we're all the same, and we're not, which is why I think there's an issue sometimes when we're trying to pull, when we try to say that there's one particular leader for black people. There can't be just one, because we come in all different shapes and sizes. I mean, there are times when Reverend Al Sharpton can speak for me, there are other times when I totally disagree. There are other times when and this is another thing that I think even as Christians, when we mess up, there's sometimes, and yes, I want to invoke his name, there were some times when Minister Louis Farrakhan said some things that I totally agree with. And there are other times when I don't. And there are many times that when we say stuff like that, I've seen pastors look at me crazy when I say, yeah, like Farrakhan said, what? No. There's some times when he says some things that are spot on. And then there are other times where there's some other things where I can't necessarily agree with. And so, again, there's never a one-size-fit-all, that we're so all-encompassing that we have to embrace all of our sides, all of our elements, all of everything that comes with it. So, when you get an individual who does what Joe does, this is just how black people talk. This is just how y'all do. We all don't talk like that. We all don't get out like that. All of us don't, and all of us ain't comfortable with you doing it. And so we got to make sure that we let an individual know that doesn't speak for me, sir. You gotta come a little better than that, because that argument that's not gonna win me over. You're not gonna win me over coming to my churches and rocking sideways till we shall overcome. That ain't gonna work with me. Tell me what your policy is and what your agenda is. That's not gonna work for me. That's not gonna work for me. I'm
Awesome.
not gonna give you my vote because you're a Democrat. I need to know what you're gonna do and how you're gonna go about doing it. And the better thing than that is give me a timeline on how it's gonna happen.
There you
because
go.
we know how many promises we've gotten, and then we don't still see them. Again, I think even as a black community, you brought it up earlier, we did the best thing President Obama did for the African American community was give us hope. Because after the 8 years, we didn't get no better. Now I appreciate the fact that we got hope, because now I can tell my son and my daughter what they can aspire to, and we know hope is a wonderful thing. But as far as what we held them to get done for the community, we didn't hold them to anything, because we didn't. After the 8 years, we didn't come away with anything any better. And so, that's just one of the things that we failed at. We got a man in the door. We got it. Now we got to come in and say, hey, listen, this is what my expectation is, and this is what you need to provide, and we need to hear something. That's why, I remember one of the candidates during the primary that I know a lot of people weren't really high on, but what's my guy name out of New York, the billionaire guy who came in at the last minute. One of the things I can applaud him for is Bloomberg. Now, again, whether you agree with him or didn't agree with him and things of that nature, one of the things we can't forget, too, I don't want to forget this, Joe Biden is 70 years old. Don't forget that. So you go back 70 years, I'm sure there was a time when Joe Biden, he wasn't rocking with the President Obamas, because if you remember that he was a part of the mass incarceration things, and he had a lot of agenda that wasn't. Now, I believe in giving a man an opportunity to make recompense for what he's done in the past, and so I'm going to need you sided with this at one time. Tell me where you stand now and what you're going to do to make atonement for it. So even with Bloomberg, he came with some baggage. But one thing I did give him a lot of credit for is he came with an agenda. He said, I'm going to pump this much money in the African American community. I'm going to do this, that, and third. Okay, got it. But nobody else was saying that. Nobody else was even saying that on that Democratic side of the party was what you're going to actually do for the African American community. So I say, hey, listen to this guy for a minute, because once he starts the dialogue, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn there. That's what he said he's going to do this. What are you going to do? And then we start to hold people accountable in that manner. And we've never done that. We were just happy with Joe being President Obama's number 2. That was enough for us. If Obama liked him, we got to love him too. That's not enough for a guy like me. Yeah, it's not enough.
I'm gonna let Randy go, and then I'm gonna bring up the very last topic, and then I'm gonna get you guys off of here, because I've been holding you guys for almost 2 hours. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I've heard the term "you talking white," because we use complete sentences. We put periods at the end of our sentences. We insert a comma every now and then. You're talking white because you're doing that. Right. A lot of places where I hear that, like me. So I think we need to fix that internally as well, because the ones that don't look like us, they think we all talk like that because that's what we do when we're out. When you see a bunch of black Marines in the corner talking, they ain't talking with periods and commas. You know, they all kinds of craziness is coming out of their mouths. But we have to get rid of that stigma that we're not educated. And me, I tell my wife all the time, like, my kid is going to be educated because my mom, I didn't have a TV growing up. I had a wall full of books. If I didn't know how to spell a word or how to know what a word meant, she said, go look it up. When she knew the word and she knew what I was trying to figure out, but she said, go look it up. That's right. The mindset that we as a culture, we as a people need to get to, to get rid of that ignorant stigma that people think that we're all dumb. And that's pretty much what it is. You know, they think we're dumb. They think we don't know how to talk. They think we all slouch back and we don't know how to use a belt. And, we don't know where our waist is, so we don't know how to pull our pants. That's the stigma that we have to get rid of before they stop looking at us like that.
Awesome. So the last thing I wanted to bring up, and I saved this to the end because I know it's I know it's controversial. So and we already started this conversation, right? Candace Owens, how does she benefit the community? How does she destroy the community?
Her rhetoric is detrimental to the community because it's detrimental to the community because she does not even attempt to speak for the community. She attempts to speak to the portion of the world who would denigrate and down this particular community. To say, in most cases, if we would conform, if we would just do certain things a certain way, then our life wouldn't be so bad. And part of the problem is again, because she perpetuates that message, she's getting the platform to be able to do it. And the crazy part is, if anybody goes and looks at her past and realize that her narrative it took a different trajectory because of the. So I even have a few people that I know of who kind of they prescribe to her message, if you will, and they're black, and I'm like, you she'll put just enough of a bit of something that makes a little bit of sense, and then take a whole another direction. Again, I'll be one to say that I get it. There's the conversation of abortion, the conversation of looting, the conversation of black on black crime. These are all conversations that are worth having. But those conversations are not to fit in the narrative of what we're dealing with right now. And all you're doing is you're diluting the conversation that we need to have with this noise that's going on, which is all she's bringing is noise that just gives those individuals that you talked about earlier who don't want to have the conversation. All you're doing is giving them an out to have the real, honest conversation that we should have. Again, I believe that yes, we need to deal with the crime in Chicago, but that only happens when opportunity comes, and we fail to give certain people opportunities and a way out of their communities and things of that nature. So that still deals with systemic racism and things of that nature and economic disenfranchisement. But when you try to throw that conversation into the place of conversations where the very servants and peacekeepers that we have put in position that are paid with by tax dollars, those individuals murdering our individuals in the street, our black and brown people in the streets, and you bring that conversation into it, those two things they should not even be in the same conversation at all. So then she is no different than the individuals when we say Black Lives Matter who scream all lives matter. She is no different than that. And so, and the sad part is when she does it, they put the spotlight and say, see, I don't have to say it, one of y'all is saying it. And then it just, all it does is dilute the conversation. So I have nothing, the greatest, I'm telling you, Dave Chappelle's narrative that he just did not, you have watched it.
That brother was speaking truth.
And that brother was spitting nothing but straight facts. I don't want to attack her personally, but I didn't beat him up when he did. I didn't beat him up when he did. I just silently said, "All right, bro." You know what I'm saying? But I got you.
Yeah.
That's my
and I just all chess games need a pod, and she's the pod.
Simple as that.
Yes, sir. Drop the mic right there.
There it is.
But you know what? I didn't want to go on the bashing session because I just wanted to throw that out there as an interesting topic. It's kind of the topic for the day.
That's not a bad thing, brother. That's the truth, and I think that is a place where we're at is where we have to start worrying about biting the tongue and just tell it like it is. Nobody said anything that was a lie. Candace Owens to me is she's not relevant because one of my philosophies is once I understand the person, they don't frustrate me anymore. These are people who bounce all over the place, and one day they're here, one day they're here. Those are the people who can be frustrated. I understand who she is, I understand what she stands for, and I understand her purpose. So it's easy for me to then, when I hear the comment, and like my man said again so eloquently, I know it's a distraction. You're trying to take my focus off of the issue and get me worried about her and what's going on. There's a lot of people, though, who don't have that intelligence level who can't fight through that distraction. So, again, it is most definitely detrimental to us. But for those of us who are educated and those of us who have the experience and the ability to discern between the two, then that's our part of that education process. We need to pull people to the side and say, hey, don't get distracted with that. This is what's going on. Stay focused.
All right.
It was something that was said a little earlier that I don't want to. It kind of ties it back in when you bring Candace into the conversation. Candace Owens talked about the fact that she's disgusted by the idea that Mr. Floyd is a martyr, right? And one of the things that I wanted to, if I could have just got her in a position where the two of us could talk, what I really wanted to say to Candace is like, here's what you're failing to understand of what you're trying to say. And I get it. Mr. Floyd had a checkered past. I get all that part. First of all, I would say it's egregious for you to bring up his past and not talk about the officer's past, who was expected to have a good record but didn't. Mm-hmm. But yet we'll go and take the victim. We did, and it's the same ploy that happened with Trayvon. It happened with anybody that had, they went in and killed, and we don't even talk about poor brother Botham Jean, who was sitting in his home, and the first thing they went and did was try to go find some weed in his house. That if he was sitting at home smoking weed, he still didn't deserve to die the way he did. So we want to try to bring up the villainous past of the person who's the victim. But what I found most egregious when she says that I find it disgusting that we're making him a martyr. Well, what I wanted to remind her is Mr. Floyd didn't want to be a martyr. He didn't ask for that position. That man simply wanted to go to the store, make a purchase, and go home to his family. He wasn't trying to be a martyr. He wasn't trying to make himself a martyr. He wasn't trying to change the world. That man simply wanted to go to the store and make a purchase. It was the police officer who made that man a martyr when they killed him in the street with 8 minutes and 46 seconds of putting that knee on his neck. So if anybody made him a martyr, it was the man and those individuals who were complicit in allowing him to be murdered in the street that made him a martyr. So don't try to villainize the brother for simply just trying to that's not what he asked for. Trayvon didn't want to be a movement. Breonna Taylor didn't want to be a movement. She don't want a law named after her. Emmett Till didn't want to be a movement. And any name that I can come up, these individuals just simply wanted to live. And in taking their life, you made him a martyr. You made his name now infamous. You guys made Kaepernick name infamous because the man just simply wanted to kneel. And you made him infamous now. You made him famous. So because of that, we talk about Kaepernick. That man was doing that for weeks before it ever even hit the news. Then all of a sudden you threw a camera in his face and said, "Why are you kneeling?" He answered the question and then you got mad. So you guys are making these individuals martyrs and you guys are making these individuals legends. And then don't turn around and when you do that now, they try to slam him for being that. Again, if that man had a choice, he would be home raising his daughter or whatever it is that he does. But you made him the martyr. So don't come with me with that garbage that it's disgusting you that he's a martyr. It's disgusting that he had to be made a martyr. And until we deal with that part, your whole message to me is null and void because it's based on a false premise. It's disingenuous.
Yep. That's the perfect point to end on, brother. Because that's so true. Hey, I want to say this, man. I appreciate you guys for accepting the call when I reached out to you and asked you to be a part of this. I, I look on my Facebook. I got it right here, and a lot of people stayed with us for a long time. And so this wasn't only just something that was healing for us, but like I told you guys when we were chatting, it's something that I think a lot of people need to hear in order to move closer to what healing looks like. Right? We need to be able to voice and to listen to the opinions of those around us, especially those that look like us and those who may not look like us, but that are feeling what we feel. And I've said this a lot on social media. Um, the first one of the first steps, I won't say the first step, but one of the first steps uh, to really uh, get equal or become equal is to live in another person's experience and to feel how that other person feels and to understand and not be so defensive, right, when they voice their views. And so I appreciate this, and I appreciate you guys for coming on. And anytime you guys want to chat, whether it be something that's live like this or something that's just personal between us, let's do it, man. Because like one of you said, we got to have these conversations, right? We got to have these conversations. So let's do it. Or if you haven't already, do it with your sphere of influence, right? Pull some young men together. Pull some. I'm a part of this group called the Sigma Beta Club. It's a group of young men from 8 to 18. We pull them together on Zoom twice a month, and we have tough conversations like this. So do it with your sphere of influence, and let's change the world just through our voices. So I really appreciate you guys. I can't express how much I appreciate you, Pastor Tuck, Mike, Tony, Tim, Eric, Cliff, even though he had to leave. All of you guys, man, I really appreciate it. I had one other brother that wanted to be here, and I want to mention his name. His name is Joshua Harris. He's a white guy. He's a corrections officer. He wanted to be here, but he just couldn't get the time. So I wanted to make sure I mention him and tell him that I appreciate him too for answering when I reached out. So with that being said, if nobody has anything else, I'm gonna ask Brother Tim if you close us out in prayer, man.
Amen. Our hearts and minds clear. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this moment. We thank you for this opportunity. Father God, we ask that everything that has been spoken was spoken with care and with kindness and with tactfulness, Father God. We ask that the people who are listening, the people who saw, the people who, Father God, are indirectly going to be touched by this gathering of minds and your spirit being poured out upon us on this moment, Father God. We thank you, O God, and we give your name all the glory and the praise. Father God, we ask that you keep your hands around us, Father God, no matter what this looks like, no matter what appears, we trust in you and we believe in you that it is still in your control and in your power. Father God, it's in you we trust and in you we believe. Father God, guide us and lead us and keep us and keep your people, O God. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to give your name all the glory and all the honor. Until we meet again, amen and amen.
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 All right, fellas. Hey, appreciate you for stopping by. Y'all in the States, have a good night, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks.